Dear participants, here is the presentation to the paper entitled Modeling the Impact of the Pandemic on Online Communication Textual Semantic Analysis by Solomiia Albota, PhD, Associate Professor of the Applied Linguistics Department at Lviv Polytechnic National University. Recently, the necessity to share information all over the world has developed increasingly due to the rapid development in digital platforms for the data dissemination. Still, the most viral priority refers to social communication via a variety of social media, especially under such tough social isolation pandemic conditions. Current lockdown situation differs from the previous one. Today, there are lots of technological facilities helping us to interact and be involved into the very heart of social services. The frequent usage of digital technologies during pandemic may have a tendency to nurture user social support. The latter may moderate the impact of social separation and distance. It is worth mentioning that modern social media may play a role of both social connection and separation. On the one hand, online communication may lead to decrease in empathy. On the other hand, it increases individualism. The purpose of this study is to introduce the modeling structure of pandemic-affected digital communication on the basis of such social media as read by semantically analyzing online statements within discussion posts allocation among them, those ones referring to the semantic pandemic-oriented groups ranging from being the most commented to the least commented. Linguistic interpretation comparison within semantic groups and statistics data are followed. Online platforms could have a significant and both positive and negative impact by granting a medium for users to disseminate information and find peers close to their thoughts, as well as to represent relevance concerning the virus state. Moreover, the latter fosters the ground for declaring angst and panic concerning the lockdown. Mitigating awareness is the outcome of a positive tone of online discussion statements being affected by the factors caused by pandemic situation. In terms of COVID-19 pandemic, yet another linguistic and psychological pattern has evolved. The angst of contagion and even a more fatal outcome has been presented as the speculation of coronavirus anxiety. Generally, cognitive linguistic explorations have revealed correlation between such double awareness and prove it to be comparatively shallow. Nevertheless, in terms of an objective threat such as virus danger, as well as in the period under which online platforms seem to be highly ranked, the shift between distinguished awareness and genuine awareness is predisposed to expand remarkably and simultaneously, has to be cross-questioned firmly. In agreement with the transparency accessibility model TSM, humans tend to gain apprehension shaping anticipation statements concerning the contiguity of a menace as well as its distinguished motion. Being subject to negativism, users may no longer productively evolve the statements under discussion, leading the latter to a standstill or endless illiteracy communicative loop. Common Internet Awareness, CIA, is initiated by the impetus of composite interconnections amidst users allocating ordinary objectives and handled with regard to global agreement support. It is worth mentioning that online platforms, the one that is under investigation, Reddit media, tend to be effective not only concerning binding users, but similarly in terms of strengthening the mitigating reaction. The probable effect of such digital means of communication in vulnerable or pandemic-affected communities is provoked by approaching several means of virtual computerized tools which empower a user with the slightest ability and facility to sequentially enhance the accumulation process of trustworthy sources, social deception, or inaccuracy. What affects the digital communication in such social platforms as Reddit is the impact of COVID-19. Concerning the opinion, perspectives of online communicative tools and cognitive processes are the basis for the key fundamentals of modeling the current pandemic-affected digital communication through the usage of textual semantic analysis. Pandemic has been observed to be, first of all, the mental concept, which will be further analyzed by textual semantics. The research principle considered in the paper is a statistic finding of most commented posts concerning pandemic, which are marked upvote, and those with the least commented section. Such differentiation allows to further interpret similar as well as opposite semantic groups within the post and statistic data. Here, conducting semantic analysis of the commented post statements, the following semantic groups are allocated. Having allocated 150 textual fragments represented in the form of commented post statements within the Reddit social media, it must be stated that explicit linguistic markers of identifying emotional negative statement tone prevail. It is substantiated by the fact that communication under the Reddit discussion thread pandemic is obviously a thorny issue, and all the statements commented to a more or less extent relate to general desperate emotional situation or speculations over it in an open way. Here we have figure 3 resembling the same semantic groups, which have been manually and interpretively allocated and commented. Apart from analyzed semantic groups and their brief overview, it is worth mentioning such traditional LIWC dimension as I words, I, me, my. The following step of the linguistic analysis in the paper is to perform the same procedure mentioned above, that this time interpretation will change according to the least commented pandemic post. In our case, the process of textual semantic analysis of the commented post statements encompasses the following semantic groups. This least commented Reddit has also enumerated 100 textual fragments with statements. The same semantic groups referring to the previous most commented statements are provided. Even exemplified materials seem to illustrate similar moods and willingness of users, thus creating dominance of negative tone statements over the positive ones. In figure 5, what is surprising that unlike previous, the most commented pandemic post personal factor is within average, indicating groups 3.54 points, where social words prevail, that average 6.97 may be interpreted in a way that this time within the least commented pandemic post there are statements which constitute general information concerning pandemic situation. Comparison in contrast of commented Reddit pandemic is considered. The first string refers to the most commented Reddit pandemic affected statement post, the second to the least ones. The first Reddit commented post in the first I words, LIWC dimension prevails over the second one, as the title of the first one embodies users' pandemic stories. The second one illustrates common truth worldwide. The second one is similar, but full of emotional concern and users' psychological support. Having contrasted and compared semantic analysis outcomes in an interpretative and statistic way, a modeling representation of the Reddit pandemic affected online communication post is introduced. To conclude, it is always significant to discover who produces information, how to disseminate it, who will get and share it, most of all, how to appropriately and trustworthy use data. Different theoretical fundamentals of social support and digital communication postulated were explored. In practical paragraphs, some of the enumerated digital communication features and existing social and cognitive model tasks were applied. The concept of pandemic and its influence on digital communication was discovered by conducting textual and semantic analysis towards the Reddit commented post. The most and the least Reddit commented statements were allocated manually and then proved by LIWC software tool. It was examined that allocated semantic groups within both Reddit posts were the same in form outwards, but different in sense inwards. Such cognitive mechanism followed by mental states as fear, angst, anxiety, and stress were established. Social support patterns were identified and interpreted according to the allocated and analyzed semantic groups of the Reddit pandemic affected digital communication posts. All the research steps were generalized and summarized upon presenting linguistic model resembling pandemic affected digital communication in terms of Reddit social media. In perspective, more sophisticated and semantically complicated linguistic model of social media complex worldwide may be introduced and contributed into further linguistic and cognitive studies. Thank you for your attention.